All right, let's dive in and let's show you how you can do some really great data modeling with Hackolade using your MongoDB infrastructure. Where I'm going to start is I'm going to reverse engineer an Atlas DB collection, right? So I'm going to do that by connecting to that Atlas DB infrastructure, right? Connect there. And then I'm going to say, okay, I want to reverse engineer the mflix sample collection. Now I'm going to do something very specific here. I'm going to try and use the inspection that we do on this collection to infer new types of relationships between elements in your database using the object IDs that we find there. So let me do that. I'll just wait a few seconds, and before we know it, we actually have this collection visualized inside our Hackolade environment. Not just the collections, right? And you can see the hierarchical structures of the documents stored here, right there, right? So really very much in tune with these modern data modeling capabilities of your document database, but also the relationship that has been created here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this model. I'm going to save it in my MongoDB webinar folder and say, okay, this is the first thing that I want to, that actually didn't work. Let me save it here inside my MongoDB webinar folder and say, okay, this is the MongoDB model that I've reverse engineered, right? Now, why am I doing that? Because in my Hackolade Studio, I can actually push this into my GitHub repo really easily. So I'm going to create a first commit here, commit and push this into the GitHub repo, so that we can then start tracking this and start working with this, data model just as we would in our agile development environment, in our CI/CD pipeline, as we would work with our code. Right? So now this model has been added to my GitHub repo. Now let me make a couple of changes here. Okay, so I'll add a new collection here. Right, the animals collection. Then I'll say, okay, let's add a first attribute here, right? And that is obviously going to be an object ID, right? I'm going to call out the ID, right? And then I'm going to say, okay, another property here is going to be the name of the animal that is going to be participating, and this is going to be a simple string. And I'm also going to link this back to my movies collection. So here I'm going to say movie ID, right? So movie ID, and this is not going to be a string. This is actually going to be an object ID, which I'm going to link over here, just like I did with the comments over there, right? The comments that were linked to the movie as well. And in order to do that, I'm actually going to also choose the right cardinality, right? I might have 0 to N animals in one movie. Great, so now I've modified the data model. I can actually, push this into MongoDB, right? I can create an update script here. If I wanted to, I could create sample data, right? So the sample data is going to be using Faker. Faker, really cool feature as well. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I could generate the update script here and even apply it if I wanted to, but more likely I'm going to give that to my DevOps people, right? But what I want to show now is that if I save this again, then I can also push this into my GitHub repo, mflix v2, right? Push this right there, right? And now if I go exit this and reopen it, then you will see that in my history of my GitHub files, you will have V1 and V2. Why is that important? Because I can actually compare those two. I can go and check, how is V1 different from V2? And it's going to show me, yes, something has been changed. The animals collection has been added, and the relationship has also been added to my ERD diagram. Right, really cool. I can generate delta models from this. All of that stuff is readily available. But what I'd like to show now is that you can actually reuse this data model to do other things, to to do things that you might be able to, that might want to provide to the rest of your enterprise environment, like for example, provide an API description to your colleagues for this data model. Right, so we've got really great functionality here to generate open API documentation. Right, again, really powerful. I need to select a template for this, a template for open API documentation, submit that, right, and then I'll go and say, okay, this is my open API model, save that. Right? It's going to take a few seconds, but you know, the Open API model is actually going to contain a whole lot of different things. It's going to create, you know, the entire transactional schema description, you know, of everything that you can do with this API, but it's also going to generate the documentation for it. Right? So this is what I'd like to store here. Open that up. Give me 1 second here while this is loading, and then you will see that the OpenAPI model is now available inside Hackolade Studio. Right, and like I said, you know, this is actually quite an elaborate structure. This is a structure that has a lot of different components to it. Right, it's got the transactional description, it's got the schema ERD, it's got all of the different things here available, and of course the artifact, the main artifact that you would be sharing with your colleagues is the OpenAPI file. You can see the file here. It's got the same schema ERD view. It's exactly the same one that we have in the MongoDB model. It's got all the components described as a hierarchy, and of course it's got the OpenAPI file. The cool thing about the OpenAPI file is that it's going to give you the validator from OpenAPI so that you can actually test the description of the API right here in your Hackolade Studio. Really powerful functionality, a real time saver for many of our clients. So let's save that and go back to our MongoDB model. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to illustrate this one more time, that the fact that you can use the MongoDB model as a basis for other things, right? Remember, we talked about the polyglot capabilities of Hackolade in the presentation, which meant that we can actually create an umbrella view of the higher level view of the data model that is technology agnostic, right? So I'm going to convert this MongoDB model, right? So let me save that here as well, right? And I'm going to say this is my polyglot model, right? So I first have to promote the MongoDB model to be the basis, right? To be the polyglot basis for our future derived models, right? So let me show you this. Okay, so I'll quickly save this and close, and then I'll show you this model here, which is the polyglot model that looks exactly the same, right, as the MongoDB model, but I can use this one to create new models, to create, for example, an Avro schema that is derived from it. Remember, what we're doing here is all part of a connected structure, right? So all of these different models are linked to each other. The OpenAPI model is linked to the MongoDB model. The polyglot model is linked to the MongoDB model, right? And now I'm going to create a new model, which is an Apache Avro schema, right? That is going to be derived from the polyglot model, right? So I'm going to go right there and say, grab this polyglot model. But in my Avro schema, I don't need everything, right? I don't need all of the mflix entities. I just want the movie entities. Now, here we go. Immediately, we've got that new model. It looks exactly the same as the MongoDB representation. However, it has adapted some of the type definitions, some of the data types based on the capabilities of this new target, of this Avro schema target. So if I save this, right, into the same webinar folder, then I am going to get the new file, which I can immediately push into the schema registry if that would be appropriate. Right, so we've got this entire new structure now. We've got a MongoDB model derived from a database. We've got an open API that's derived from the MongoDB model. We promoted the MongoDB model to be a polyglot model, and now we can actually derive other models from that polyglot model, like, for example, the Avro schema. Great. With that, I'm going to wrap up this little demo. I hope this was useful, and I look forward to handing it over to someone else. Thank you. Bye.